So October number 25, paper 2-1. The 15 marker is a bit tricky, only in the comprehension part of it. Otherwise, it's very simple code-wise.
Okay.
So let's start. So they're saying there's a one-day array called competitor name, which is used to store the names of the competitors. Maximum number is 30. Then there are 10 rounds in the competition with the maximum score of 30 per round. There is a 2D array called competitor score that will store the score in each of the 10 rounds for each competitor. And then this is the most important part, that is that the first index of the array competitor score is the same as the index of the competitor name. Okay, so keeping this in mind, we'll first visualize what the most important part of it. So this is the array competitor name, and there's supposed to be only 30 values. And I'll always visualize the arrays vertically because it is more helpful that way, because 2D array, it's easier to map it to on the 2D array directly. Okay, so just random t names. You don't have to like put in values, say 1 or 2 is fine, as long as you can just visualize the stuff. Okay, then in the second part, they're asking that the 2D array will store the score in each of the 10 rounds for each competitor, which makes it very obvious that every team will be playing 10 rounds. So every team will have this sort of a structure where at index, and then in the third part, they're saying the first index of the competitor is the same as the index of competitor in the competitor name, which means their mapping is 1-to-1. So when I'm at row 1 of competitor name, that means at row 1 of competitor score array, round 1 points would be on column 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, all the way till the end, round 10.
Okay.
Similarly, if I'm talking about AC Milan and index 5, then all of their scores for all the 10 rounds would be stored at index 5. Okay, so now they're saying after the 10 rounds have been completed, the highest score and the lowest score for each of the competitor are discarded. Okay,
Why
so
is it added?
all right, so discarded here would mean that you would essentially ignore those values. So either we'll ignore them or we'll simply cancel them out from the score. So I'll explain.
So they won't be part of the calculation.
No, they won't be part of calculation. So we'll have to remove them from the calculation manually. Okay, the competitor has an overall score of 210 or more, moves on to the next round. So overall score of 210 or more moves on to the next round, the next competition. A competitor with an overall score between this moves becomes a reserve, and an overall score below 180 does not qualify. So we have three conditions here. Okay,
Second.
so in the next part, they're saying that you have to input the total score out of 30 for each competitor in each round. Okay, which means that against each team, we have to go and we have to ask the user to input these values one by one. So we are
Which
essentially going through our 2D array one value at a time. And
hmm,
while we input the values, we also have to check that the input of the score must be between 0 to 30. It cannot be more than that. Okay,
okay.
so let's start with this first. So in very simple terms, first of all, we look at the size of the 2D array. So the 2D array has 30 rows and then it has 10 columns, and we are supposed to go to every column, every row. So we have to use a nested for loop for the 2D array. So I'll say for row 1 to 30, and then for column 1 to 10. This is for the number of rounds, or we can also call it rounds, whatever you want to call. So next column, and we have next row. Now, if I simply just go inside this loop and if I output the value, so output competition score current row comma column. So what it will do is it will start printing the values row by row. It will print 8, 4, 6, etc. Then 5, 6, 7, etc. Then 4, 6, 3. Because the outer loop here is the row number, and then the inner loop is column. So for each row, the inner loop would run completely. So for row 1, when row is 1, column would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way till the 10. And then row would change, would become 2, and then column would again be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way till the 10. So this is the idea. Now we are getting one value at a time, but the question says that you have to input a value here. These are values that are not stored there already. So we are going to ask the user to input the value. Now before we do that, the question uses the word of validate this input. Whenever we have the word validate, that means we either have to use while or we have to use repeat until, because we are not going to allow the input to be entered until it is correct or it is within the range. So what we'll do here now is inside this nested loop, I'll have another layer of loop, which would be the third loop, and maybe that could be the repeat until loop. So repeat until. Okay, so here we're going to ask the user to input the value. So let's get rid of this competition score, and we are going to store some value at this cell. So this would be, let's call it score. Now, what would be the score? The question said the score would be between 0 to 30. So I'll ask the user to input the score first. I'll say output enter score from 0 to 30, and then I'll input that value into my score variable. And I'll keep on doing that until score is greater than equal to 0 and score is less than equal to 30. So as long as the user keeps inputting random values that are not in the range, so this loop will keep on repeating, which will make sure that no invalid value is ever stored inside the competition score array. And then this would guarantee us that this score would definitely be between 0 to 30. So if we are running the loop for the first time, so first row, first column, it would store some value here, maybe let's say 25. So 25 goes here, then column 2, maybe 4, then column 3, 6, so on and so forth. So this is how we'll first store all the correct values for all the teams in the array. Then they're saying calculates the overall score for each competitor, discarding the lowest and the highest, and output the name of each competitor. And if they move on to the next competition, are reserved or do not qualify, and calculate and output the ones who are disqualified. Okay, so what here we need to do is here we are supposed to create counters, and here we are supposed to find the total for each team. Okay, in order to find total for each team, what we have to do is for each row, we have to find the column sum, right? We have to sum all the columns. So here the sum would be like 20. Here in this case, the sum could be like 50, some could be 35, some could be 47, etc. So on and so forth. Now, how do we do this? Okay, so in this case, they've not asked us to store the values of the totals anywhere. So we don't need to make another array for that. What we can do is we can simply create a variable and we can reset it to every team. So let's have a variable called overall, and I'll set overall to 0. Okay, so what is this area? So between this nested for loop, this area of code, whatever you write here, this would be triggered
This is
before you go into all of the columns. So when I'm setting the overall score to 0 or total, let's call it
sir.
total score.
Question.
We are setting the total score here to 0. Now what will happen is before we go into all the columns for each row, total score will always be set to 0. So initially it would be 0 here for Madrid, then it would become 0 for City, then it would become 0 for Barca, because we don't want to add into the previous totals of the other teams. Okay, so this would be in the correct spot. Then what we have to do is that whatever score we're getting here, we can just simply add it into the total. So total score is equal to total score plus the current score. Okay, now what has happened? Let's say the user inputted score to be 10. So we stored that 10 into the relevant place in the array, and then we simply add this 10 into the total. So initially, let's say if it is 8, so then 8 plus 4 would become 12, 12 plus 6 would become 18, and this would keep on happening inside the inner loop. So we will not leave the inner loop until the whole inner loop is complete. Okay, so next part they're saying is that calculate the overall average score for each competitor, discarding the highest and the lowest scores. Okay, and then output the name of each competitor. So we have to find the total score. Okay, so this is the code that will, so this code will run before iterating all columns as we discussed, and this code here will run before we go to next row. Okay, now once you've seen all the columns here, in the total score variable, we are guaranteed that we would have some total here. Maybe the total is 60. So the total score would be saving 60 right now. Before we reset it and we make it 0 here for this second row, we are supposed to do some comparisons on it. Okay, now what are the
Could
comparisons?
you repeat this?
So we'll have the score stored here in the total score variable. Now the question says that you also need to find the highest and the lowest scores for each team, and then you need to discard them, right? Okay, this simply means that before we go to the next row and after we've seen all the columns, again, it means we have seen all these columns for Madrid, all these columns for City, one at a time. So before we go on to the next row, I want to first calculate the updated score. So it would become total score is equal to the current total score. And since we need to discard the highest and the lowest value, so I'll just subtract highest and lowest from these values. Or we can just put brackets here, or it's fine if you don't put brackets here, right? So it means if the highest is, let's say, 8 and the lowest is 1, so we are essentially saying that 60 minus 8 minus 1, which would become um, 51, right? So this would equate to 51. That is what we're
Yes.
doing. But we have not calculated highest and lowest yet, and that is completely fine. So we'll do that in a bit. Although you'll be
Okay.
doing it, in an orderly manner. So then they're saying calculate output the name of competitors if they move into the next competition, are reserved or do not qualify. Okay, how do we do this? So we have the checks here. So score of 210 or more, then 180 and 209, and then less than 280. So let's go ahead and write these checks. So here we have the total score that is updated after discarding the highest and the lowest values. So here is where we'll actually check. So we'll see if the total score is greater than 210, then we are going to say, so they're saying you also have to output the name of the competitor. Okay, first let's get that. How do we get the name of the competitor? So whichever row we're in, that is the index of the name of the competitor. So if we're in
Second.
row 3, so row 3 is bar, so if we're in row 6 is bind. So how do we get the name of the competitor? We'll simply get competitor name. So we will use the row index here. So row index, and we'll get the value out. So we'll say the name of the array was competitor name, I believe. Competitor name, current row, and we'll get the C name out, the competitor name out. The name of the array was competitor name, yes. So this will allow, so if the row is 2, so at second row we have city. If the row is 1, at the first row we have 100. So we get the names here correctly. So from the row index. Okay, so if the total score is greater than this value, then we are supposed to increment the counts as well. They're saying calculate and output the number of competitors who have qualified, reserved, and did not qualify. So we have to keep counters for all of them. So maybe qualified is equal to qualified plus 1. You can use whatever spellings you want. Then the second range is between 180 and 209. So else if total score is greater than equal to 180 and total score is less than equal to 209, then it means that we'll add one value in reserved. Okay, and then else if total score is less than 180 then we are supposed to say that they're disqualified, so we'll do disqualified plus 1, like this. Okay, meanwhile, they're also asking us that we need to output the name of the competitor if they move into that round. Okay, so we have to tell their status and their name. So let's say Madrid has 60 points. So as per the question, since they are less than 180, so we are supposed to output that Madrid did not, or Madrid disqualified. So I'll output the team name, which is stored in CNAME, which we got here from the current row, and I'll say is disqualified, like this. And we need to do the same thing. So anytime we get a score in a certain range, we'll update it. So CNAME is now a reserve,
Hmm.
and
Check.
here we'll say there is CNAME is qualified further or something. Okay, with this, we have successfully completed all of the counting and all of the outputs. Then they're also saying output the number of competitors who have done all of this. Okay, now before we go on to this part, we are only left with finding the highest, lowest, and the lowest scores. that is very simple. You already know how we do that. We go through all the values in the array and we check if the current value is greater than the max value. We keep on updating that. Now, in order to do that, we'll go back into this loop because this is where we're going into every column. This is where we'll be updating the values one by one for highest and the lowest. So the safest assumption always is that you say that the first value is the highest and the first value is also the lowest. Or in this case, the range is given. The range is going to be 0 to 30. So they had written it somewhere 0 to 30. Yes, 0 to 30. So we can set the maximum minimum accordingly. We can set the minimum to 31 and max to 0. It's totally up to you. So both approaches are fine. So now going back here in this part where we'll run the code before we go through all the columns, right? Before we go through all the scores of a certain team, we are supposed to first initialize the values. So here I'm going to initialize the highest and the lowest. So I can either set them both to the first score of their respective round scores. So here, let's say if I'm at City, so City's first round score is 5, so I can set it to 5 here. Or if I'm at Arsenal, then their first round score is 1, so I can set it to 1 here. This would make sure that we are not second guessing the range of the values. Either this is method 1. You can use either of these because here the range is known, method 1. Okay, when the range is not known, we use this, but when the range is known, we can simply make the assumption. We'll say highest would be equal to -1 because we are guaranteed that every value would be larger than -1, and then we can set the lowest to 31 because we know every value in the of the score would be less than 31 because the given range is between 0 to 30. So this is the method number 2. Whatever you want to use it, let's stick to a simpler method this time. Okay, so now where we were finding a total score, here we'll just update the values of the highest and the lowest. So we'll check if the current score value is greater than, okay, again, let's say the current score value is 8. So we're checking, is 8 greater than -1? Yes. So 8 would become the max. Then maybe the next point is not 60, would be 26. So then we'll check, is 26 greater than 8? Yes. So 26 then would become the max value. So if any value of score is currently greater than the highest value, then highest would be initialized to the score value. Else if any score is less than the lowest value, then lowest value would become the score. Simple maximum minimum, as easy as it can be, like this. So with this, we have completed the whole code up till the last part where we have to calculate and output the number of the stats of disqualified, reserves, and the teams that qualified further. Okay, we can only do that once we have gone through all the teams of all their competitive scores. So once that will only happen after this loop ends. Once this
Say,
loop has ended, then we are going to output the tournament counters like this. Okay, now let's output the tournament counters. So where are they stored? They're stored in disqualified, they're stored in RES, and they're stored in qualified. So I'll just output them. I'll say the count of teams who qualified, reserved, and then disqualified. We can either print them in the same line or we can print them on 3 separate lines. It's up to you. So this would become qualified, reserved, and then disqualified like this. And with this, the whole question is complete. Now, before we actually end it, we know that we are supposed to add comments. So I'll add comments now. I'll say iterate to the array for all rows and columns. You can do it in the same line or you can do it in a line above. Then here we are validating. So validating score to be between 0 to 30. Then here we are finding max and min score values. And then here we are counting and outputting team status. And then here we are outputting the tournament counters. And with this, the whole question is complete.